Hello everybody, this is Tom in Los Angeles. I hope you're doing well. Let's take a look at Canto 24 today of Inferno. Canto 24 is a very beautiful canto. It starts with a long simile, poetic simile, very similar to what we've seen in Canto 21st, about the Venetian arsenal, the port of Venice. And the very first terzina, in fact, is a time determinant. It's really telling us about a moment of the year, shortly before the equinox of spring, basically. So Dante is talking about the period of the year around the end of winter, so between January 20th and the 20th of February, or the 18th of February. So winter is finishing. If you care about this type of details, this first terzina is directly inspired by one very similar verse in Virgil, third Georgic. The Georgics are another very famous group of books by Virgil, together with the Aeneid, of course. And Dante is explaining the simile in many terzinas to give us a great introduction to the canto, also for poetic reasons, to reestablish a certain balance in the rhythm after the very dynamic previous cantos. And here he is also introducing a completely new bolgia. The bolgia that we're going to see in the 24th canto is the bolgia of the thieves in general, which is the seventh bolgia within still circle number 8 of Inferno. So towards half the day, when the hoarfrost mimes the image of her white sister, this is really beautiful. In Italian, hoarfrost is brina. La brina in sulla terra assempra l'immagine di sua sorella bianca. This pen that is not sharp long is referring to the hoarfrost. It's imitating the snow, but not for long, because it melts very quickly. So it's a really, really beautiful and country-related, nature-related simile. It's been noted that here in particular, Dante is using, and in this canto specifically, a list of they're called rime equivoche in Italian, which I guess you can translate as equivocal rhymes. And they're called equivocal rhymes because they are rhymes between words that not only sound the same, they're also spelled the same, they only have different meanings. Quick examples are in verse 2 and 6, tempra and tempra. Then we have a little bit lower, faccia and faccia. In both cases, they mean different things, and Dante is using them to achieve a rhyme. Some commentators say that this has something to do with the actual contrapasso in Canto 24 and 25, and how there is a concept of exchange of ambiguity and exchange of identity between characters and between people. It's possible, and if that's the case, and if that's something that Dante thought about, it's really beautiful, it's really sophisticated. My doubt about this theory is that I don't see many of these equivocal rhymes. I see these two that I mentioned. Another one lower down, which is piglio and piglio, so 3 in total. And then I believe I see another one later on in this canto, and then in the following canto, not many. So it's not really a lot of them, but it's possible. It's very possible. The point that Dante is making in this long introduction is that, and again, he's using a lot of words to explain something that really is simple, is that he felt this way, just like the shepherd or the farmer who feels a little tricked by the fact that he can see the hoarfrost outside, and so he comes back all disappointed, but then shortly after realizes that it wasn't snow, it was only hoarfrost, and he can go out and take his sheep. So we can read it in both ways. We can read it as Dante the shepherd, who was taken aback and he misunderstood the fact that Virgil was so maybe angry and in a foul mood because of how he had been treated by the demons for his misunderstandings. Or we can also read the simile by matching Virgil with the pastor, with the shepherd or the farmer, who took something for something else and he misunderstood. But what happened, his master's stormy brow, quickly as this, the hurt had found its plaster, reading from Pinsky. So for when we stood before the ruined bridge, my leader's face turned to me with a sweet expression, the same as I had first beheld at the mountain's base. He's referring to the very first time when he met with Virgil, where Virgil was looking at him with a very positive and we could almost imagine with a slight smile as well. So Virgil has quickly changed back his mood into a positive one. And this is good for Dante. So again, very simple description, very simple narrative, but a very long description. On verse number 12, Dante says, Poi riede e la speranza ringavagna. I love it when Dante seems to invent terms in the vernacular Italian. Ringavagna comes from the word gavagna, that in his times really meant the bread basket. And ringavagnare, as a verb, he intends it as put back into the bread basket. And since he's talking about hope, in the English translation, this turns out as finds hope back within his reach. So hope is being put back in the bread basket. Again, very naturalistic and country life oriented type of similes that he loved because he loved Virgil mainly. From the edge of the sixth bolgia, they are climbing up towards the seventh, because as we remember, there was no real bridge, everything was crumbled down. And Virgil offers to help him. He carries Dante for a while, and after a little while, he asks Dante to actually make effort by himself with his mortal and heavy body. So Dante makes an effort, a physical effort. There is a description here which is important about the configuration of Malebolge, which is, we should imagine it like a theater really, only with less sharp edges. Basically, each bolgia is lower than the previous one, and therefore the outside ridge of each bolgia is higher than the inside ridge of each bolgia. And this is why, by them climbing the ridge going down towards the seventh, there is a little less. There are a little less steps for them to make. At this point, Dante is huffing and puffing, and he sits down after all this physical effort, this climbing, and Virgil feels like launching into a little bit of a what he probably intends as an encouraging invective towards Dante. To cast off sloth now well behooves you, for resting upon soft down or underneath the blankest cloth. This is a way for Virgil to express something that he probably in this moment feels like it's the right way to encourage Dante. And there is a question around this part, this next few tertines. And the question is why is Virgil, in order to encourage Dante, using an example of something which is earthly fame, basically, as a carrot for Dante to go after, which is negative within the moral context that Dante is moving. And if, for example, it was St. Thomas Aquinas instead of Virgil, he certainly would not say, hey, Dante, you need to move, you need to be as determined as you can in order to gain earthly fame, because to gain earthly fame, St. Thomas Aquinas knew that under his philosophical and theological context was not really a good thing to go after. But Virgil doesn't. And in fact, to go after earthly fame is something that Virgil himself, as a historic man, went after. So he, in a Christian sense, he committed that type of sin. Would it be good in any sense, or in other context, for Dante to think about earthly fame? For example, when Brunetto Latini talked to him about it, was it a positive thing? And in other contexts, will it be bad? Because later on in Purgatory, Canto number, I believe, 11, Dante, in writing Purgatory 11, talks very openly about earthly fame being unimportant and being something fleeting that disappears. There is a hint, if we are looking at this as investigators, there is a little bit of a hint in the language that Dante wants to tell us here, readers, that it's Virgil who's making a mistake, who's making yet another mistake after the mistakes he's made in the last couple of cantos. In fact, in verse 51, in Italian, Virgil is talking about people who don't leave anything of themselves in history. And in looking at these people, he says, without any fame, without any efforts to achieve fame, their life leaves really nothing on this earth, just like smoke in the air, and just like some sprays in the water, some water sprays brought away by the wind. And these two exact similes are found also in the Book of Wisdom, in the Scriptures, Book 5, verse 14, which is more or less, I'm going to try and read it from the Italian, which more or less is talking about the righteous or the hopeful man versus the godless person. And in the Book of Wisdom, which, by the way, the Book of Wisdom is included only in the Catholic Bible and not in the Protestant one, is one of those additional books that the Protestant Bible does not include. It says, the hope of the godless man is like chaff that is taken by the wind, in the wind. Just like soft foam that's moved by the wind, by the storm, and is just like smoke that is dispersed and it disappears in the wind. So really the simile is literally the same that Dante is using, and because of this reason we are brought to think that he's referring to something that Virgil shouldn't have said, but he's saying anyway. So this is one option. The other option is that we are still in Inferno, and in Inferno Dante is still growing, therefore he still allows himself, or his own character in the comedy, to think of earthly fame as something positive to aim towards. My preference is for the first interpretation, for the fact that Dante here is describing yet another mistake of Virgil, who reasoning under a different context and philosophy, a non-Christian one, is giving, philosophically speaking, the wrong type of suggestion to Dante. In the end, he's really telling him something positive, which is move, you need to be determined, you need to be active and aggressive, but the way he says it, is the point here. If you understand me, come, act now to profit yourself. He's referring to the road ahead for Dante. So he's really, once again, giving us, the readers, a glimpse of what's to come, the journey forward that Dante has to do up Purgatory and then up in Paradiso. He might be referring here, Virgil, to the meaning of Purgatory and Paradiso, which is to go beyond what Dante can learn in Inferno. In Inferno, Dante as the everyman, in a sense, and so therefore us, the readers, in Inferno, we get to explore evil very much in detail, very closely. And what we can do personally after reading Inferno is to make a decision to avoid evil, and so to not do evil, not commit evil. A bit like the mission or vision of Google, the company, at least as it used to be. But that's not enough, it's not sufficient. The point of the Divine Comedy is that it's one single work composed of 3 different books. Therefore, it's even more important in Purgatory and Paradiso that Dante examines what good means and what is good, and even more important that he acts on it. And that's part of the message that is implicit here. The influence of Inferno on the reader is not enough. The constructive part has yet to come, and that's Purgatorio and Paradiso. Moving on, it's self-explanatory. The action, what happens, Virgil and Dante are climbing or walking across the bridge towards the 7th ditch, and across the 7th ditch, and Dante can hear some type of voice from below. They descend, and then the pouch showed itself to me. I saw in its confines serpents, a frightening swarm of weird kinds, such as to remember now still chills my blood. It's a list of reptiles and serpents and snakes that Dante took from, for the most part, from Lucan's Pharsalia, that is one of Dante's main sources that we've seen already some other times. Book number 9. This, in the book 9 of Pharsalia, all these serpents and reptiles were said to origin from the chopped off head of Medusa, because it was full of serpents and snakes, and they all originated and were generated by her head. In a series of similes that purposely remind us of the Garden of Eden, of Adam and Eve, because the condemned souls here are naked, like Adam and Eve. They have this type of almost like a parody of the fig leaf in the snake that is covering their genital area. And so definitely what Dante wants to do here is, yes, almost a parody, an infernal parody of the Garden of Eden and the relationship between Adam and Eve and the serpent and the snake. They were naked. They didn't even have a heliotrope for safety. A heliotrope is a fascinating item from the Middle Ages, this stone that was supposed to have magical properties. It would cure you from snake bites, but also it would give its possessor the gift of invisibility. We see a lot of this type of stories in, for example, in Boccaccio's stories that are hilarious. I would recommend everybody to read the Decameron by Boccaccio, because it tells you a lot of this type of legends in the Middle Ages, and they are a lot of fun, So these sinners are, their hands are tied by serpents, by snakes, and they have this type of almost underwear, but it's made of a snake or made of snakes. However, there is one in particular, one of these sinners, who is suffering a slightly different contrapasso. Dante couldn't even write an O or an I, which are very quick letters to write in ink, that so quickly, after being bitten by a snake, he disappears in cinder, and then his body reappears or regenerates itself. And that's why Dante is quoting the phoenix, the mythological animal, the phoenix, and its flames. That was quoted, among other places and sources, in Ovid's Metamorphoses, book number 15. Right after this comparison, Dante spends at least 5 lines explaining in pretty realistic detail what many have read as an epileptic crisis, as one who falls and knows not how. If a demon pulled him down, or another blockage human life entails, blockage meaning something inside their body, obturing, blocking the veins, the blood, and when he rises, stares about confused by the great anguish that he knows he feels, and looking sighs. And many commentators have said and are convinced today that the reason why Dante is able to describe these symptoms in such a realistic and intense way is that he himself was suffering from epilepsy or something similar. It could have been narcolepsy, we're not completely sure. He's a Toscan, he's the famous, within the Divine Comedy, Vanni Fucci. Vanni Fucci is somebody who was already dead when Dante was writing his comedy, like many of the people who are in the comedy. In fact, this is a question that keeps returning, which is the unfairness of Dante about writing about his enemies, the people he didn't like, in the comedy. Yeah, he did a lot of that for sure, and possibly or probably there was some vengefulness in this type of behavior on Dante's part, but the vast majority of them, if not all of them, were already dead. And this applies to Vanni Fucci as well. He died around 1297, 1298. He was a man from Pistoia, and Pistoia had a bad reputation in Dante's times of having generated many people who were violent, troublemakers, and arrogant, and who just did not comply to rules and regulations. Dante, knowing the name, says here that he thought he would have ended up with the violent. So he says, for in his time I have known him as a man of blood and rage, which is a biblical expression. Dante, he thought that Vanni Fucci would be guilty of violence, and therefore, but he finds him here in this much lower level of hell. Why is that? And why is his contrapasso different from the contrapasso punishment of the others who are only being tortured by serpents, but they don't have this kind of phoenix magic happening to their bodies? He says that he was a thief, but not only a thief, he was somebody who took adornments from the sacristy for which another falsely was condemned. Historically, it's been documented that this Vanni Fucci, with a gang of friends, they actually went into one of the main churches, I believe in Pistoia, if it wasn't even Florence, and stole some of the sacred items of the church, and they were very precious as well. So it was a sacrilegious act, and on top of that, apparently according to Dante, somebody else was punished for this action. So this is why this particular type of thief is being punished in this worse way, that his body has to suffer this decomposition, sudden decomposition, and then regenerate constantly as a cycle. The question at this point is still, at a general level, can still be made, which is, why are thieves punished in Dante's Inferno at this such low level and this close to Lucifer, because we only have a couple of ditches before actually meeting Lucifer, and then we have the ninth circle. So why the thieves? I mean, we've seen murders, we've seen any type of terrible sin so far, and only now we see the thief there. Again, like other times, there are two things. One, to consider that Dante has always in mind the good, the collective good, when he's talking about sins. And your sin is worse as much as it hurts the collective good. On the other hand, there is a quote by St. Thomas Aquinas, and we always have to go back to either Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, to properly understand Dante, that says, if people kept stealing from each other, human society itself would be destroyed, would collapse. So clearly, Dante is taking this as a as the reasoning why Vanni Fucci and the thieves are being punished at such a low level. But at this point, Vanni Fucci, as a revenge against Dante, brings him. It's actually the ninth and last time that a personal prophecy is given to Dante in Inferno. Always the same in the end, because they're telling him he's going to be exiled from Florence. In this case, first Pistoia strips her land of blacks, the blacks and white Guelphs. Pistoia in 1301 is going to kick out the blacks. Then Florence changes her citizens. The opposite happens. In 1301, 1302, all the white Guelphs, including Dante, are kicked out of Florence. And that's where the Dante's exile takes place. And finally, there's going to be this big battle. We're not exactly sure which one Vanni Fucci is referring to, either one in 1302, where blacks of Pistoia take the whites' stronghold that was in Serravalle, another town, or a battle in 1306 that they basically decided the blacks' victory over the whites in Pistoia, and maybe this second one is the case. But in any case, the canto ends with this completely redundant but very fierce, and I have told you this to bring grief to you, to see how beastly and violent and evil Vanni Fucci is. In the 25th canto, Dante will continue with Vanni Fucci. We're still going to see Vanni Fucci in the next canto, because it's going to be a continuation. And so we'll speak soon about that. I hope you enjoyed Canto 24.